What makes you think you have the right to challenge me in this manner? The elderly gentleman snapped, his tone cutting and offended. I remained unmoved, maintaining steady eye contact as I responded. Mr. Nguyen, I stated with controlled composure, I'm here to assist you, but if you desire my assistance, I require complete transparency, every single detail. He let out a harsh breath, his ego visibly wounded, yet he offered no further protest. Briefly, he averted his gaze, shaking his head in frustration. I go by Danielle, a name I selected for myself during childhood. I'm a 30-year-old legal professional who never adopted my family's surname. I forged my own identity instead. My career was constructed on determination, transforming childhood trauma into ambitious drive. At 6 years of age, my parents left me at a children's home, forcing me to construct a life without their presence. They departed without looking back, leaving me questioning my own worth and wondering why I wasn't sufficient. Now, years later, these same individuals who discarded me are seated in my office, pleading for legal representation, completely unaware of my identity. I was 6 the final time I encountered them. That morning, my mother had clothed me in my finest attire, a yellow dress adorned with tiny white daisies, and informed me we were visiting somewhere special. I recall gripping her hand firmly as we entered the children's home, the brilliant outdoor sunshine creating a stark contrast with the dimly illuminated corridors inside. The atmosphere carried the scent of disinfectants mixed with something else indefinable, something frigid, like void. She crouched before me, smoothing a hair strand away from my face. You'll adore this place, she whispered, her voice gentle yet empty. They'll provide excellent care for you. I couldn't comprehend her meaning. When will you return? I inquired, my tiny hands grasping hers. She paused, her eyes shifting away before forcing a smile. Soon, darling. Behave yourself, all right? I didn't weep as she departed. I simply remained there, gazing at the door, anticipating it would open again. But it never did. Hours transformed into days before I understood she wouldn't return. That moment taught me the meaning of solitude. The children's home became my universe, a place where I rapidly discovered that survival required resilience. I ceased questioning why my parents never returned. The other children weren't interested in hearing it, and the caretakers lacked answers. Instead, I concentrated on what I could manage, my education. Books became my refuge, a realm where I could immerse myself in tales far removed from the institutional walls surrounding me. I made a promise to myself to become superior, more intelligent, and stronger than anyone who believed I wasn't worth preserving. However, the evenings were most difficult. Alone in my bed, I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering what I had done to cause their abandonment. Did I cry excessively? Was I insufficiently helpful? Every question became fuel for the fire within me, a fire that burned to prove, even if only to myself, that I was valuable. I would demonstrate to them somehow, some way, that I wasn't the worthless girl they perceived me to be. Years passed before I learned the truth about their abandonment. The orphanage administrator, a compassionate but overwhelmed woman named Mrs. Patel, had taken me aside when I was approximately 10. She had witnessed the day my parents brought me there and always seemed to pity me in a way I didn't fully grasp. Danielle, she said gently, seating me in her small, cluttered office, you're mature enough now to understand why your parents brought you here. Her voice was kind, but her words struck like a dagger. Your parents came from very traditional backgrounds. When your younger brother was born, they believed it was their obligation to dedicate all their attention and resources to him as the family's successor. I stared at her, the words penetrating like stones. But I'm their daughter, I said, my voice quavering. Why didn't they want me to? Mrs. Patel sighed, her eyes filled with compassion. It's not about your actions or lack thereof, Danielle. It's about them and their beliefs. It's wrong, terribly wrong, but they thought they were doing what was expected. That night, lying in bed, the full force of their rejection struck me. They hadn't abandoned me due to anything I had done. They left me because of my gender, because to them, I wasn't worth keeping. After that conversation, something within me transformed. I stopped questioning their departure and began focusing on moving forward. The rejection that once devastated me became my motivation. At school, I dedicated myself to every subject, determined to excel. I remained after hours to study in the library, consuming books that expanded my imagination and taught me about a world far larger than the orphanage. By 16, I was winning academic competitions and earning recognition from teachers who recognized my potential. Danielle, one instructor told me, "You have great potential. You just need the right opportunities." Those words planted hope within me. I began applying for scholarships with one objective: gaining admission to a prestigious university and proving to myself that I could rise above my circumstances. When the acceptance letter arrived, I held it like a golden ticket. It wasn't just an educational opportunity, it was my escape route. The orphanage celebrated with a small party, and Mrs. Patel, who had always quietly supported me, embraced me tightly. "You've earned this, Danielle," she said. "Now show the world your capabilities." University was overwhelming. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who believed in me, or at least respected my contributions. My professors noticed my determination, and my peers were drawn to my focus and resolve. I seized every opportunity: internships, leadership positions, and study groups that pushed my limits. Law school followed, and while demanding, I flourished on the challenge. I learned to channel my emotions into my work, using my personal story to connect with the cases I studied. I understood powerlessness and wanted to ensure others wouldn't experience the same feeling. Upon graduation, I received offers from some of the nation's top firms. I selected a New York firm specializing in helping underserved communities, a place where I could make a difference while building my career. Throughout it all, I kept my past private, not from shame, but because I wanted people to see who I had become, not the girl who had been abandoned. Every achievement felt like a triumph, a reminder that I had become someone my younger self could be proud of. During my second year at the firm, I met Mark. He was an attorney on a joint case we worked, a complex housing rights matter. Initially, he was just another professional, but as weeks passed, I noticed his warmth and sharp humor. He could make even the most stressful days feel lighter. Our relationship developed slowly, almost naturally. Late office nights became shared dinners, and casual work conversations became deeper life discussions. I was hesitant initially. I'd spent so long building protective walls that letting someone in felt dangerous. But Mark was patient, never pressuring me to share more than I was comfortable with. One evening after winning our case, he walked me home. "You know," he said as we stood by my apartment door, "I think you're the most driven person I've met, but sometimes it's acceptable to let someone else share that burden." His words lingered long after he left, and for the first time in years, I felt like perhaps I didn't have to handle everything alone. As our relationship grew serious, we discussed the future, our aspirations, and where we envisioned ourselves in 5 or 10 years. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine having a family, something I'd avoided considering. Mark wanted children, and so did I, though the thought frightened me. I didn't want to repeat my parents' mistakes, but with him, it seemed possible. We soon realized that building our dream life would require more than hard work. Between student loans, rent, and New York's cost of living, our combined salaries were stretched thin. We both worked extensive hours, but the prospect of starting a family someday made the financial gap seem even wider. Mark was supportive, constantly reminding me we were partners. "We'll solve this together," he said one night as we reviewed budgets and savings plans at the kitchen table. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do more, push myself harder to ensure our future security. I loved my firm work, helping powerless people, using law to advocate for those unable to fight for themselves. It provided purpose, but honestly, it didn't pay well. Mark and I weren't struggling, but we weren't building the financial security needed to start a family either. Despite caring about my clients and the firm's mission, I knew I couldn't ignore practical matters forever. One evening, reviewing my expanding caseload, I realized change was necessary. It wasn't easy. I'd spent years establishing myself in public interest law, but I knew it was time to transition. I needed to consider the future, not just mine, but ours. Over dinner that night, I share my thoughts with Mark. I've been considering, I said, twirling pasta on my fork, applying to larger firms, perhaps corporate law. He looked at me with surprise and concern. Are you certain? I know how much you love your current work. I do, I admitted, but it's insufficient. If we want a family someday, we need to plan accordingly. I want to provide our children the stability I lacked growing up. He reached across the table, taking my hand. If that's your desire, I support you, he said simply. I know you'll succeed anywhere. While updating my resume and researching larger firms, another thought began emerging, one I'd suppressed for years. My family, the people who had abandoned me. I'd convinced myself I didn't need them, that I was better without them. But now, facing the prospect of starting my own family, I found myself wondering, who were they? What kind of life had they built without me? I knew little about them, just fragments I'd pieced together over the years. Mrs. Patel had once mentioned they were wealthy, part of a prominent community. This fact had always stung. They hadn't left me due to financial inability. They left because they didn't want me. The bitterness was difficult to overcome, but curiosity began outweighing the pain. I needed more information. The following day, I contacted the orphanage. Mrs. Patel had retired, but the new director, Claire, was kind and helpful. We still have some of your records, she said. Why don't you visit? We can discuss what you're seeking. I agreed, my stomach tightening as I hung up. I wasn't sure what I'd discover, but I knew I had to take this first step. Days later, I found myself walking through the familiar orphanage gates. Years had passed since my last visit, but the sight of weathered brick walls and distant sounds of children playing brought back floods of memories. Claire greeted me warmly, her kind smile putting me at ease. Come in, Danielle, she said, leading me to her office. I gathered some files I thought might help. We sat down, and she placed a thin folder on the desk between us. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, scanning handwritten notes and forms from my initial admission. Your parents, Claire began gently, came from a very affluent family. From what I can determine, they owned several businesses and held prominent community positions. She paused, gauging my reaction. They didn't abandon you due to financial hardship. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had suspected this, but hearing confirmation was still painful. Do you have anything else about them? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Claire hesitated before sliding a newspaper article photocopy across the desk. It was a feature on the Nguyen family, a story about their success, expanding company, and perfect, polished life. There was a photo of them, my parents, older now but unmistakable, standing proudly beside a young man I knew was my brother. They appeared so complete, so whole, as if I had never existed. After leaving the orphanage that day, I felt torn in two. One part desperately sought answers while the other screamed to let it go. What good would excavating the past accomplish? They had made their choice, and I had made mine. I had worked too hard to let their rejection define me now. I shoved the information folder into a home drawer and decided to focus on my future instead. Weeks later, my efforts were rewarded. I received an offer from a top corporate law firm, exactly the position that could provide the stability needed for the life Mark and I had envisioned. The compensation was incredible, and the opportunity to handle high-profile cases exceeded my expectations. When I told Mark, his face illuminated with pride. I knew you'd get it, he said, embracing me. You deserve this, Danielle. I threw myself into the new role, determined to prove myself again. The work was challenging, but I thrived under pressure. Long office hours left little time to dwell on family or unanswered questions. For a while, it seemed I had made the right choice, leaving the past buried. Several years passed, and life changed in unimaginable ways. Mark and I welcomed our daughter Mia into the world, a tiny, perfect bundle of joy who transformed our lives in the best possible way. Motherhood revealed a side of me I didn't know existed. I wanted to give Mia everything I had lacked: unconditional love, security, and unwavering knowledge that she was wanted. Simultaneously, my career flourished. I became one of the firm's youngest senior attorneys, handling major clients and earning a reputation for precision and drive. Long hours persisted, but with Mia waiting at home, I found new balance. Mark was my foundation, stepping in whenever I needed to stay late or prepare for major cases. We were building our dream life, founded on mutual respect and love. Yet occasionally, in quiet moments while rocking Mia to sleep, past shadows would creep in. I'd think about my parents' choices, how they had abandoned me without hesitation. Holding Mia in my arms, I couldn't fathom how anyone could do that to their child. I pushed these thoughts away, telling myself it didn't matter. I had my family now, the one I had chosen, the one that mattered. One morning, I walked into my office, coffee in hand, ready for another packed day of meetings and case preparation. My assistant knocked lightly, just as I was settling in. "Danielle," she said with a bright smile, "Mr. Roberts wants to see you in his office. He said it's about a new client." I set down my coffee and straightened my blazer, curiosity piqued. New clients were always exciting challenges, and I prided myself on being the firm's go-to for high-stakes cases. As I entered Mr. Roberts' office, he looked up from papers and gestured for me to sit. "Good morning, Danielle," he began, leaning back. "We've acquired a significant new client. It's somewhat complicated: financial mismanagement, lawsuits, potential bankruptcy. High profile but discreet, and I think you're perfect for this job." He slid a file across the desk. "This one's entirely yours." I picked up the folder and opened it, scanning the top page. The name at the top made my heart stop. Gwyn Holdings. My parents' business. My breath caught as I stared at the familiar name, memories of the orphanage, and that faded newspaper article rushing back simultaneously. I looked up at Mr. Roberts, struggling to maintain composure. "Thank you," I said evenly. "I'll begin immediately." I returned to my office in a daze, clutching the folder as if it might disappear if I released it. My mind raced, a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't identify. Anger, confusion, curiosity all swirled together, leaving me breathless. I closed my door and sat at my desk, staring at the file name.
Gwyn Holdings.
My parents' company. For a long time, I remained motionless, torn between the instinct to hide the file and forget it existed or to examine every detail and see how far they had fallen. What were the odds that, after all these years, they would end up in my office needing my help? The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent my entire life trying to forget them, and now here they were, on paper at least, intruding on the life I had built. After hesitating, I opened the folder. If I was going to handle this case or decide against it, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The initial pages outlined basic facts. Gwyn Holdings was teetering on bankruptcy's edge, entangled in multiple lawsuits from creditors, partners, and former employees. It was a financial catastrophe screaming of neglect and mismanagement. As I delved deeper, one name kept appearing: Baung Gwyn. My brother. The special one. The golden child they had chosen over me. Apparently, he had been given company control several years ago and had driven it straight into disaster. Misguided investments, failure to adapt to market trends, and reckless spending had left the business in ruins. Every page felt like a punch to my gut. I leaned back, releasing a shaky breath. It was almost poetic. The family that had discarded me to prioritize their son now sat on ruin's edge because of him. And here I was, their last hope, the one person who could potentially save them. The irony cut like a blade through the emotional whirlwind inside me. That evening, I walked through the door still holding the folder like it might slip away. Mark was in the kitchen, bouncing Mia on his hip while stirring a pot. The dinner aroma should have been comforting, but I felt too unsettled to notice. "You're home early," he said with a warm smile, glancing at me. "Everything all right?" I hesitated, placing the folder on the counter. "Not really," I admitted. "There's something significant I need to tell you." He immediately set Mia in her playpen and turned to face me, concern evident. "What's happening?" I took a deep breath and told him everything: the new client, the name on the file, and the history I had spent years trying to leave behind. As I spoke, his expression shifted from surprise to disbelief to understanding. "So let me understand this correctly," he said, his voice calm but deliberate. "The family who abandoned you is now in financial ruin, and their survival depends on you?" "Pretty much," I said, crossing my arms and leaning against the counter. "It's surreal, isn't it?" Mark shook his head, his brow furrowed. "What will you do? Are you considering taking the case?" I sighed, running my hand through my hair. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I can't simply ignore it. I think I need to meet with them, see what they're like now. Maybe it'll help me decide." Mark nodded slowly, leaning against the opposite counter. "That's reasonable. You've always been someone who faces things directly. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" I asked, meeting his steady gaze. "Do what's best for you," he said. "Not for them. Not for anyone else. You owe them nothing, Danielle. If you decide to take this case, it must be on your terms." His words hit hard, but I nodded. "I'll remember that," I said quietly. "The meeting's tomorrow. After that, I'll decide." Mark approached and pulled me into an embrace, his arms a steady anchor against the emotional storm inside me. "Whatever you choose," he murmured, "I've got your back." The next morning, I sat at my desk staring at the phone for what felt like eternity. My assistant had already contacted Nguyen Holdings to arrange the meeting, and they had agreed almost immediately. Now all that remained was confirming the time. I took a deep breath, picked up the receiver, and dialed. A woman's voice answered promptly. "Nguyen Holdings, how may I direct your call?" "This is Danielle from Cross and Roberts," I said, maintaining professional tone. "I'd like to confirm tomorrow's meeting with Mr. Nguyen." "Of course," she replied cheerfully. "Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Bao Nguyen will be there at 11 a.m. Does that work?" My grip on the phone tightened at Bao's name mention. "Yes, that works perfectly," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Thank you." As I hung up, my stomach churned. The meeting was set. In less than 24 hours, I would be sitting face to face with the family who had left me behind. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Regardless of how this meeting proceeded, I knew one thing. I was ready to face them. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling as my mind raced through every possible scenario. What would I say? How would they react? Would they even recognize me? Every time I closed my eyes, their faces from that newspaper article flashed in my mind, older but unmistakable. By morning, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. I prepared with almost robotic focus, carefully selecting a sleek black suit and pulling my hair into a neat bun. I wanted to project confidence, even if I felt anything but confident. As I entered the conference room at 10:50 a.m., I gave myself one final mental pep talk. "You've faced tougher challenges, Danielle. You can do this." At exactly 11 a.m., the door opened and they entered. My father was first, looking every bit as proud and authoritative as I remembered. Behind him was Bao, his features sharper than in photos, but still carrying that same privileged air. Neither gave me a second glance as they approached the table. "Miss Danielle, thank you for meeting with us," my father said, extending his hand. His voice was polite, professional, and utterly devoid of recognition. I shook his hand firmly, my composure flawless. "Of course," I replied evenly. "Please have a seat." As they settled, I opened the folder before me, flipping through pages with deliberate calm. "Let's get straight to the point," I said, my tone sharp and professional. "From my review, Nguyen Holdings is in a precarious financial situation. Years of mismanagement, reckless investments, and mounting lawsuits have left the company on bankruptcy's brink." I just couldn't resist. My father stiffened, his face flushed, and I could see pride and anger building behind his composed exterior. Finally, he exploded. "What makes you think you have the right to challenge me in this manner?" He barked, his voice echoing through the room. For a moment, I just stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. He had no idea who I was, no idea that the person sitting across from him was the same little girl he had deemed unworthy all those years ago. And now I'm here, sitting across from the man who left me behind, demanding my help. Part of me wants to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Another part wants to scream. He doesn't even recognize me. He doesn't see the person I've become, the person who now controls what happens next. So I'm asking you, what would you do if you were me? Would you confront him here and now, rip off the mask and force him to see the truth? See who the person he abandoned has become? Would you take the case and show him that I'm stronger than he ever gave me credit for? Or would you walk away, leaving him to deal with the mess he and his golden child created? And then there's another thought that keeps creeping in. Should I ruin their lives for good? Should I let their empire crumble and watch them feel the pain they once made me endure? Is that justice? Is that revenge? I don't know anymore. All I know is that whatever I decide will change everything. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm still deciding, and maybe your perspective will help me figure out how this story ends. Hey there! Did you enjoy the story? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us tremendously and ensures you won't miss more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.